Hi everybody, welcome back to the Healthy Honeys podcast. Today I wanted to share with you my talk that I gave at Team Vasculitis' event back when I was like 34 weeks pregnant. Team Vasculitis is an organization run by my friend Felicia for awareness on vasculitis, and that is the encompassing label for the disease that I have, granulomatosis with polyangiitis. And at this event I talked about basically getting pregnant and fertility after being on chemotherapy. So for 2 years straight, I was on cyclophosphamide, which is an absolutely terrible and toxic drug. Technically it saved my life at the time, but it does cause infertility. So I was on quite the journey after to bring my fertility around so I could have children. And so when I was 34 weeks pregnant, I gave this talk. And I wanted to share it with you today, but I wanted to do a little disclaimer because for some reason, when I'm listening back, I'm like, oh my goodness, I was so nervous and I had zero lung capacity. So you're going to be hearing me doing this and probably stammering a lot. So, fair warning. Anyway, let's get into it. I hope you like it and I hope it helps.
Hello, Holly.
Hi.
It's so good to see you. I am just going to kind of hand it over to you. Holly is going to do something a little different than we've done for the other presentations. She's going to have some content to share, and then we will chat afterwards. So I'm going to stop my video and audio and give you the floor.
Hey.
If you need me to pop back on, though, I'm here, so
Okay.
I can jump in. Okay.
So hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I'm excited to be speaking to you today. My name's Holly. I'm a blogger from Alberta, Canada, and I'm currently 34 weeks pregnant, getting pretty big. Like many of you, I was diagnosed with a form of vasculitis called Wegener's granulomatosis, and for a long time, I thought this would be a death sentence for my dream of having children. That was something that was told to me quite often is, you have to be really careful, make sure you don't get pregnant, because often if you get pregnant on the medications that they put you on, it can really hurt the baby and it can hurt your body. And I wanted to share a good story, my story of getting pregnant after being on all of these awful medications. I was diagnosed at 14 after struggling for 2 years, usual sinus bleeding, crusting, malaise, struggling to breathe, struggling to walk without crutches at one point, and eventually I had acute kidney failure. After diagnosis, I felt the relief of prednisone and cyclophosphamide, taking away the inflammation, but then after 2 years of dealing with the side effects of those drugs, you feel sick all the time. I lost half my hair, I gained so much water weight, I look like a different person, and all the other issues I'm sure you're all familiar with. I was constantly told by my doctors that as soon as I even thought of being sexually active, I needed to go on hormonal birth control because pregnancy would be detrimental to my body, and there's a very low chance of being able to carry a child to term anyway. The thing is, I hadn't even started my cycle yet. Luckily, as soon as I stopped the cyclophosphamide and moved to Azathioprine 2 years later, it came right away, and I was 16. After being sick for so long, I really didn't think being healthy enough to have children would be in the cards for me. But here I am, 34 weeks pregnant with what has actually been an amazingly healthy pregnancy. I wish I could go back and comfort my teenage self, but I also think that the desire to have kids was one of the only things that lit a fire under myself to actually take care of my health the way that I needed to. I wanted to discuss today what I did, what I wish I did more of, and what you can do holistically and medicinally to optimize your fertility as well. I want you to leave here today feeling empowered that with the right nutrition and lifestyle effects, you can have a healthy and positive fertility journey despite your previous health struggles. Something that I think we don't think about is how important our fertility is with our overall health, not just, oh, I want to have kids in 2 years, so in a year I'll get off birth control and we'll start trying. Really, it's such a holistic journey of trying to make sure that your hormones are balanced, especially in today's world when so many people are struggling with fertility, not just people who are chronically ill. So I want to mention that even though I'm approaching this from the point of view of a woman, many of these things can be applied to men's hormonal health as well. Our fertility and hormonal health are great markers for how our bodies are doing and something that everyone should be paying attention to. Firstly, I wanted to discuss the state that we're all living in, stress, and this is going to be a major theme. All of our medications and our diseases themselves are stressful to our bodies, and this is what's mainly going to impact your fertility journey. Our basic survival as humans are things that can be done under any circumstances, things like breathing, our hearts beating, fight or flight, basic detoxifying, and so on. However, fertility falls into what is prioritized when our bodies feel safe and nurtured. Think of it this way. What are all the telltale signs of someone who is fertile? The stereotype of, oh, wow, they're really good looking. And, it's usually they have healthy hair growth, clear skin, optimal body fat to muscle ratio. But these things aren't necessary when you're in a famine or you're in a war. Your body will switch from using your optimal sex hormones like progesterone and testosterone to cortisol. Cortisol tells us that we aren't safe, that we need to conserve energy, and having children is just not in the cards right now if it's high enough. Now, those of us on prednisone will know that prednisone mimics cortisol in the body. And when we have that constant amount of what our body perceives as a stress hormone, we're going to have a harder time. But luckily, I'm on 5 milligrams of prednisone every day. I do because I have a kidney transplant. I probably should mention that. I'll never be able to be off of prednisone, but luckily a lot of vasculitis people, or people with vasculitis, have been able to get off prednisone. Prednisone is one of those drugs that I hope we all eventually are able to get off of. But I was able to get pregnant being on 5 milligrams. So we have more working against us, and we have to make our bodies feel safe. How do we do that? Most of the time when we talk about stress, we're talking about the mental aspects. But I think the major key really is in our diet. We have to make our bodies feel as if they're in a state of abundance. We can see the opposite of this when we look at women who experience amenorrhea, the loss of menstrual cycles, when they're eating a ketogenic, vegan, or low-calorie diet. All of these are restrictive diets that put our bodies into states of stress. And I'm sure all of you have probably experienced this too. I know I went through this. You can go back on my Instagram and you'll see old pictures of me when I was doing keto. When we're chronically ill, sometimes we try all these different diets because people say like, oh yes, you're sick, you should try keto. You should try being a vegan. You should try all these different diets to try and deal with the chronic illness. And I'm not saying that keto specifically doesn't reduce inflammation. I did experience that myself, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But unfortunately, when you're chronically ill, a lot of hormetic stress, beneficial stress, can actually cause your body to feel like even more stressed out than it was before. So hormetic stress for the average person is a lot different than the person who is chronically ill, right? Any stress can be a trigger for more health issues. So personally, when I am trying to avoid stress, I focused on 4 things nutritionally, and I'll go on to talk a little bit more about other things you can do, but nutrition is the main thing that I did. Saturated fat. Saturated fat because our bodies use cholesterol and our fat-soluble vitamins as the building blocks of our sex hormones. If you're not getting enough vitamin A, cholesterol, all those things, you're not going to be able to actually create progesterone and testosterone. Women make testosterone too, but mostly men have actually been struggling a lot in recent years with levels of testosterone. And I think that's is closely correlated with the amount of cholesterol in our diets. And the second thing I focused on was easily accessible carbohydrates like fruit, honey, and root vegetables like potatoes and carrots to allow my body to feel like it was in a state of abundance. I'll talk a bit more about how I did that without raising my blood sugar. and then an appropriate amount of calories that felt good for my body. So I didn't do a low-calorie diet, and organic whole foods that didn't have excessive colors, preservatives, things that my body would then have to try and detoxify. As a result of eating this way, I felt calmer, stronger, more able to handle stress, and had a very regular cycle, which is a great marker for our hormonal health. So to talk a little bit more about the saturated fat thing, almost all my doctors told me to cut down on fat. But our bodies need the cholesterol in eggs, meat, and butter to build our sex hormones. When we don't have the beneficial fats and replace them with industrial oils like canola and soybean oil, our bodies try to build with unstable and rancid materials. It's like building a house with styrofoam when we need lumber. I'm not saying that a really fat-heavy diet like keto is what we need to be doing, though. We just need to make sure that the fats we are eating are natural and ancestrally consistent, and preferably raw so we can give our bodies the best building blocks possible. The saturated fat causes heart disease myth has been debunked many times and is mostly being peddled by vegan and family doctors, though I would steer clear of that advice if I was trying to optimize my fertility again. Especially for any of you men listening, average testosterone levels have been going down by 1.2% per year for the past 20 years, according to, you can look up the Finnish study, and that's amongst the general population, not the chronically ill, not the people who are on prednisone, not the people who are immunocompromised. Those things also impact your testosterone. In fact, a man who's 46 this year has 20% less testosterone than his father did when the father was 46. What has changed? This shows me how much we need to protect our hormonal health. It seems there's a very high correlation with the increase in chronic illness. The second pillar of nutrition that I focused on might even be more controversial, but I started eating easy carbs. They say eat more complex carbs. Within reason, I ate easy carbs, and almost never alone. So my blood sugar was regulated, but the difference in my energy levels was very apparent. For example, a glass of orange juice with collagen powder and a couple egg yolks mixed in, or some cheese with raw honey on top. The honey and orange juice provided my body with the knowledge that we're in a state of abundance. There's no famine or stress or time of stress when it comes to food, and we have plenty of calories to provide for a pregnancy and then another human being. Pregnancy and breastfeeding are very energy-intensive times, not something our bodies take lightly at all. And by pairing those easy carbohydrates with protein and fat every time, I was still able to have healthy blood sugar regulation. If you struggle with blood sugar at all, I'm sure many of you do if you're on prednisone. I know I did for a long time. Oops, sorry. I would look into @glucosegoddess on Instagram. And if you really want to deep dive, Dr. Ray Peat's information on metabolism was a huge game changer for me, especially after going through the ketogenic diet. The reason I say easy carbs and not complex carbohydrates is the amount of work our body needs to do to get that energy accessible. We don't have a lot of excess energy when we're chronically ill. And many of us actually have a really hard time digesting grains. Myself, I have celiac, which is an autoimmune disease that activates when I eat gluten. But I also realize that if I have excessive fiber in my diet, it's not good. my gut is not healthy at all when it comes to fiber digestion. If, however, you are able to eat gluten and you have a healthier gut than me, a genuine sourdough is a better option because many of the hard to digest parts of the wheat have been eaten by the souring process. White rice and potatoes are also things that I eat because they're much easier to digest, but the starch content can still be a little bit problematic for some people when they're healing their gut. So experiment with what easily digestible carbohydrates work for you, and then try and pair them with fats and proteins, so that way you're not getting that really huge blood sugar spike. Insulin comes in, lowers your blood sugar, you feel like crap. You probably know the cycle. Some people might say, well, why don't I just eat neither? The body can live off of no carbohydrates in a state of ketosis. And I would say, yes, technically it can. In fact, some people do find ketosis to be beneficial for their chronic illnesses. But is that a state of survival or is that a state of thriving? In a state of ketosis, our thyroid actually stops producing T3, a hormone that regulates our metabolism. And our metabolism is a very important aspect of our fertility. If we have a slow metabolism, we have a system that isn't working at its optimal output, I guess you could say. I saw this in my own personal experience with ketosis. After about 4 months of doing keto, I think it was, my hair started falling out and my cycle was not regular at all, as it usually was. By month 6, my hair was awful. It was so thin, and I decided to, you know what, I don't want to lose my hair. I already did that with chemo and everything, so I decided to reintroduce carbohydrates. My inflammation had actually been down when doing the diet, but I decided it wasn't worth it. There are other ways to lower inflammation, and usually inflammation is a marker, right? A marker that we can see what other problems we're having. And then a couple months after quitting keto, I had major regrowth, like a little strand, like this is what my hair looked like, just right here. And then right here was like a huge chunk of just curly hair again. This was straight, and then this was all curly. Okay, so I have the two most controversial out of the way. The more obvious was eating calories and giving my body a break from all the toxic sludge that's in our modern food system. It was a sacrifice to eat more organic foods because of the cost, and it's a sacrifice to try and find, a farmer who would sell me raw milk and stuff like that and good eggs. But it does make a difference. Glyphosate specifically has been classified as an endocrine disrupting chemical, and which mimics or interferes with the body's hormones and are linked with developmental and reproductive problems, as well as brain and immune system dysfunction. Glyphosate is the world's most used herbicide. I'm sure many of you have it in your garage. It's the active ingredient in Roundup. Dr. Stephanie Seneff from MIT presented in 2018 at the Institute of Sustainable Nutrition her findings that glyphosate not only impacts our abilities to get pregnant, but also impacts pregnancy itself, shortening the gestation period and disrupting hormones of the baby, which that sucks. Unfortunately, even organic food can sometimes be tainted with glyphosate because it's used so much. So eating high quality saturated fat, a good amount of food with easy to access carbohydrates, and a low toxin diet were the nutritional elements I implemented, and a low toxin diet were the nutritional elements that I implemented to make my body feel like I was in a state of abundance and increase my chances of getting pregnant. But what can we do from a medical point of view? Again, this is not medical advice. I should say that throughout the whole thing. This is for educational purposes only. And please do your own research before you go ahead with any of the points I talk about. But number one, switching to the least toxic medications possible. I was on cyclophosphamide for 2 years, and most of the research that I've read about cyclophosphamide is that it makes you sterile. I'm actually blown away that I was able to get pregnant. I really think, obviously, my diet had a huge part of this, but cyclophosphamide is literally cytoxic. Let me go back to my notes here. We all know the medications that we're on are toxic to our bodies just by the reactions that we have when we take them. But sometimes we don't consider just how toxic they are. Cyclophosphamide is literally cytoxic, meaning toxic to our cells. The shortest amount of time on these medications, the better. And hopefully your doctors know that and you can advocate for yourself. I hope that this isn't news to you, but I also realized that it was news to me about a year in that cyclophosphamide does cause infertility. It's not always in the cards to switch, but when we have the ability and our bodies react well, it can make a big difference. I was on cyclophosphamide for 2 years, like I said, but azathioprine now works great for me as long as I take it regularly. I unfortunately did relapse in high school after switching to azathioprine, but that was really because of I was on a very low dose. And azathioprine is also a pregnancy safe drug. No pharmaceutical is 100% safe, but it is considered safe. And of course, if you're able to get 100% off your medications without any issue, that's the best option. I know a couple of people with vasculitis. I think lupus and Wegener's, both of the people that I know, they were able to get off of them eventually after, I think, about 10 years. And that's obviously the best option if you're able to do that. It's not in the cards for me because of my kidney transplant. But yeah, second, another one, another crazier one, but avoiding hormonal birth control if you're a woman. This is something that's very personal, so I'm just going to give you some information and, let you make a decision after you do your own research. Something we're not told about when our doctors try and push this on us is that hormonal birth control is a class 1 carcinogen, and it depletes the nutrients in our and it depletes the nutrients our bodies need in order to carry a baby. These include vitamin C, B2, B6, and folate. Deficiencies in these key vitamins have been linked to IBS, increased risk of depression, and blood clots. Interestingly enough, women who are prescribed birth control are at an increased risk for suicide as well. Instead of taking birth control, I followed the natural family planning method, so I would know when I was ovulating, and I would plan around that time. I didn't get pregnant for 5 years, and then when my husband and I decided to try for a baby, we were able to get pregnant right away, because I understood that I couldn't get pregnant every day of the month. Pharmaceutical companies make so much money off of us thinking that you can get pregnant all the time, but it just isn't true. If you'd like more information on alternative forms of birth control, you can message me after this, and I'll send you some great resources. It is something to be careful about, though. Obviously, if you're still on these medications, do your own research, and you have to be quite vigilant about it. Above all, I found that taking my health into my own hands was the catalyst for improving my fertility. My knowledge of these things pre-conception was because I did the research, not because my doctors told me any of this. In fact, my doctors actively tried to dissuade me from most of these decisions, specifically eating saturated fat and birth control, or they wanted me to be on birth control. I'm not saying don't listen to your medical team, though, but I want you to know how much power you actually have in your fertility journey. As for actually being pregnant, I realized that my pregnancy so far, I've had a non-medical pregnancy. I haven't actually been to a doctor. I haven't had any ultrasounds.
Let's see. I have some questions here for you, Miss Holly. What has been the biggest mental struggle that you've been dealing with as you've been pregnant?
Something that everybody I know who has had a healthy a birth that I would want to emulate has not been chronically ill. So seeing someone like, for example, my cousin, I'm planning a home birth. I hired a traditional midwife. We want to be out of the system as much as possible. I know that's not a recommendation, by the way. That's just what I want to do. So having those stories were great, but it was always in the back of my mind, like, yeah, but your body's not like their body. Yeah, but you're sick. Something that I had to kind of tackle was, what? My GPA and my drugs and everything like that have been considered safe. I know the risks. I've done the research. I know that I'm at risk for preeclampsia. So therefore, I'm going to drink dandelion tea to make sure that my blood pressure stays low. My blood pressure is very low. I actually have to lick salt often because my blood pressure gets so low. And because of that mental struggle, I was able to then do the research to make sure that I was able to tackle those problems head on. Nothing was a surprise, or nothing hopefully will be a surprise, because I can recognize them first. So it was kind of like, it was bad and it was good. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. What is the one thing you wish more women knew about fertility? If you were going to pinpoint one thing and be like, this is my hot topic, what would it be?
You can only get pregnant 6 days out of the month. Like, best case scenario, your fertility, your husband's sperm is super strong. Like, 6 days is basically the topper-ish end. And I think that's so cool that we have that ability to find out when we're ovulating, and kind of just either do whatever you want in those 6 days to get pregnant or not get pregnant. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And then you are a wealth of information. I've told several people, like, if I have a question, I ask Holly, and she'll send me like 15 resources. So what are a couple resources that anybody listening to this that you would recommend, accounts to follow, or websites that have really great, less biased information that you really enjoy, that people can use?
Okay, so one of the things that I think was super important for me was looking at our ancestral health, basically. We've only been so sick for so long. Of course, people in the past died, but most often they died of acute issues, not chronic issues. Not like today, most people are dying of chronic health problems. So Dr. Weston A. Price, he was a dentist, but he went around and he studied a lot of tribes who hadn't incorporated Western medicine and Western diets mostly, and saw that the difference between eating an ancestrally consistent diet and not, basically, what we're eating. And so he has a book, I think it's called Nutritional Deficiencies. There's also a foundation called the Weston A. Price Foundation. Their website is wapf.com, I'm pretty sure. It's really good. Has a lot of good stuff. There's actually a book. Let me just grab that really quick.
And anybody watching this, I'm going to put it in the notes when I post this video so that you can just click on these links that Holly is giving and you don't have to write them down or go hunt them down right this second. That way they're available to everybody.
A book that I really liked, if you want to dive more into metabolism, is How to Heal Your Metabolism by Kate Deering. She does a lot of good, or she explains a lot of information that Dr. Ray Peat, who's a biologist, he has a lot of research on that, and this book was a good comprehensive guide on basically stop blaming aging for your slowing metabolism, which I really liked. Also, Nourishing Traditions is just a great cookbook. I just like books, sorry.
No, books are great.
And then at Glucose Goddess is on Instagram. She does charts of how different foods impact your blood sugar. So for example, if you were to have a spoonful of honey compared to a piece of white bread, the white bread is going to spike your blood sugar way more than the honey, which I didn't even realize, because you think like honey is higher on the index, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So she's a really good resource. And yeah.
All right, Miss Holly, as always, I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. There's actually someone in the chat. Michael asked a question.
Oh, that is
my biggest question would be hearing from some folks that cooked foods are the most bioavailable forms versus raw. Have you experimented with this? So that's actually a really good question. I did experiment a lot with raw food. There was a study, I forget when it was, I'll have to find it for you, but there was a study done on raw versus cooked foods, and it showed that when you ate raw foods compared to cooked, there is more of an autoimmune response. So not autoimmune, but like the immune system is very heightened, and that is what got me interested in eating raw food. And I have noticed that when I drink raw milk versus pasteurized milk, I have no immune reaction. Whereas when I drink a pasteurized milk, my sinuses start getting inflamed. You know what I mean? And then with raw meat, I found the same thing. I know that's weird, but that is what I found. But I do eat cooked food still. Yeah.
Right. That's really interesting. Yeah, because I joke. Only one of our daughters eats yogurt. We don't really give it to her. The other one has a bit of an eczema issue, so we try to be really careful with her. But she asked me why I don't eat yogurt like she does. And I said, like, when I look at yogurt, I just think about all the mucus that is going to happen after it. I just can't buy most forms of dairy like that because it does. I have a very quick response for a couple of hours afterwards. And it's just like, is it worth it? Not for yogurt, maybe for ice cream.
And the thing is, it's so linked also. That is one thing that has been linked is the amount of hormones that we are pumping into the animals that we're milking. Is it milk or is it the artificial hormones that we're feeding the cows? You know what I mean? Or is it the fact that maybe we're not getting enough bacteria in the milk? Like lactase is an enzyme that you need to digest lactose. Lactase is actually already present in raw milk, but it is destroyed when you pasteurize it.
Right, right. And of course, Holly knows because I talk to her about it all the time. I have a beef allergy that I've always I've had a really bad issue, but recently I've been able to add a little grass-fed beef because if you're eating not grass-fed beef, you're also getting their response to the grains. So, as somebody with celiac like Holly has, or a heightened immune system where you're trying to avoid gluten and you're trying to avoid some of those grains, if that's what the animal ate, that is also something that is going to cause a response in your body. And paying attention to those kind of one step away, we get upset about plants getting treated with pesticides, right? You want the organic ones. It's kind of the same thing in your meat and in your milk, and what is in them, what are they eating that transfers to your body. So really paying attention to where these things are coming from and what they added to it. All right, Miss Holly, thank you so much. I appreciate you. And if anybody has any questions, Holly is tagged everywhere, but she is Healthy Holly on Instagram. And like I said, I message her regularly and be like, can you send me resources on? And within 5 minutes, I've got 15 things when she responds. So she is a wealth of information that I am very, very grateful for. Thank you so much for your time, Holly.
Thank you for putting this on. This was so much fun.
We'll talk soon.
Okay, see ya.
Bye.
Wow, did you make it to the end of the episode? Congratulations, you have way more patience than I do. I had a very hard time doing that. There are a couple of things I wanted to mention. Okay, so I recommended Glucose Goddess's info on blood sugar, but I really meant her resources on how to make sure your blood sugar doesn't spike. So acetic acid in apple cider vinegar before a donut, that kind of thing. She doesn't think that regular consumption of simple carbs for health purposes is legitimate, but I do from my own experience, and that's why I also mentioned Dr. Ray Peat. Definitely deep dive into podcasts he had been featured in and his writings at raypeat.com. Another good resource is lifeblood.com. They sell really good supplements, but they also have a lot of really great information. If you'd like to support the podcast, feel free to go to the bio.fm link in the show notes. It has a lot of affiliate links. I only share items that I personally use and really enjoy. And using those links, you can buy something and it will have a small kickback towards me, but it will not cost you any extra. My current favorite actually is the Lifeblood Methylene Blue. I am definitely going to do a show on that soon because that stuff is life-changing. If you think other people would enjoy this, please leave your most honest 5-star review, of course, on whatever platform you're listening on. It helps the show get discovered by those who might benefit from it. Thank you so much for tuning into today's show. I hope it helped you on your health journey. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to me on Instagram. It is @HealthyHolly, and I'll try and help as best as I can. Talk to you next time. Bye.